Thank you very much. I look forward to getting to know that woman. She seems very special to me. Well, I have to tell you something. I didn't see this coming. I'm a little bit close to tears right now because I was greeting people before service, and two people walked in behind me and said, "Jim, it's Tim and Nancy." Tim and Nancy were some of my closest friends. They were at the first church that I ever served. I spent a lifetime providing clinical work of individual marriage and family psychotherapy, and one day this little church, this amazing little church, came to me and said, "Would you apply for our position? Our founding pastor has retired." Well, I had attended there, so I knew something of the people. Nancy was, I believe, the chair of the search committee. It would be much more appropriate to say they are family to me than they are friends to me. That's why I'm so near to tears. I can't believe you're here. I love them dearly. My name is Jim McKenzie. You can call me Pastor Jim, Reverend Jim, the very Reverend Jim, or just Jim, which is kind of what I prefer, but really whatever you're comfortable with. I am the one who stands before you today with the very high privilege of following in the work that Mark Williams has provided for this church and this community. As an interim minister, usually they ask me to go to churches with great problems. Not this time. Not this time. I think they must have seen me as burnt out or something. And they said, "Let's send him over there to Marco Island and they'll take care of him for a while." Something like that. I'm an interim pastor, and I want to thank Mark. I can't thank him enough for the 10 years, nearly 10 years of service that he had provided, the love that he has shown you, Emily and the children, and all that you have shared together. You are very fortunate people, and you know that. I am a fortunate minister to follow in Mark's footsteps. As I said, I am an interim minister. The simple definition of that is that I will be your pastor. I will provide for your spiritual needs. I will care for you, lead worship, Bible study. I will be there when you are sick and in trouble. And we'll walk home together. I also, as an interim minister, serve as a consultant to your search committee. I will help them to secure your next settled minister and ensure that that will be a good choice. We'll talk a great deal about what interim ministry is. We will talk about what that process looks like in order for us to be successful. But I need to tell you, I didn't come here today to talk about the what. I came here today to talk with you about the how. How we will go about this. How we will live out our faith with one another. How our time and ministry together will be defined. How we will describe this relationship, and other people will look in and describe this relationship that we have. In other words, how will Jesus be seen in us? That's what I want to talk about. I kept thinking over the last few weeks that if I were you, I would want to know who this strange interim minister is in front of us. I'd want to know things about him, like who he is, where he comes from, how he thinks and feels. Now you have Tim and Nancy who can just answer for you. But I think I would want to know things like, how will he interact with me? How will he treat me? And whether I can trust him. Can I trust him in this sacred calling on Marco Island? In a word, I would want to know how we are going to relate with each other. Our passage in 1 John, I believe, gives us some indication. Did you hear what Alicia said? Let us love one another, for love comes from God. And since God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. That's it. That's it, folks. That's all we need to know. John's words from the end of the first century are not just a commentary on relationships between friends and neighbors, not just between parents and children, in-laws and outlaws, but between pastors and parishioners. You see, the main themes of John's letter are love and fellowship with God, and he makes it very clear that the proof of a genuine relationship with God is found in a life of love. Let us love one another, for love comes from God, and since God so loved us, we ought to love one another. That's it. And now, I try to do that. I'm the chief of sinners. You need to know that about me. I am imperfect. I fail as often as I'm successful. But I try to allow God's good grace to pick me up and help me move forward again. And now I have this opportunity to do this, to grow in faith alongside you all. To be honest with you, it's a little overwhelming right now. We came down, arrived on Wednesday evening from Wisconsin. Wisconsin is different than Marco Island. Like about 180 degrees different. We have just been overwhelmed with the positive challenges. I've already said the people, all the people we have met, Denny and Kathy, John and Kevin, and all of you are just overwhelmingly wonderful people. But we found that it's different than Wisconsin, you see. I'll give you an example. I've discovered that you have these cute little owls. And you're not going to believe this, but I think that they actually live underground instead of in the trees where owls are supposed to be. I don't quite get that, but I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure. And you have these fire ants. Yvonne was telling me this week that if you ever get bit by one, you're going to think you've been bit by a panther. So the best thing, I can't remember, Yvonne, if you said this or not, but the best thing is just to stay in the water because they don't come in the water. But if you do, if you're in the water, you're going to see something that you won't see in Wisconsin. You're going to see all of these beautiful gifts of God washing up on the shore. And every morning you can go out and collect them if you want. They are unique, beautiful little seashells. And they will remind us how beautiful and unique all of us are. And that there's so much to love about each other. I also am learning that you get free car washes every day about 2 or 3 o'clock. We don't have that in Wisconsin. But perhaps, as I said, the most amazing, magical thing I've seen since Wednesday is that love that I see you sharing. And you all have been sharing that in spades with Karen and me. It's just about anywhere I look on Marco Island. God really must have thought I needed a break. It's a beautiful place to live, I give you that, and we're thankful to be among you, thankful to be following in Mark's footsteps, and to be thankful that we are among you. You want to know who I am? I am a hopeful, optimistic, energetic, and passionate person. I like to laugh, and I occasionally cry. And I'm here because I want to be here. I choose to be with you. I figure I'll be here about 6 months, but I've assured the search committee, if it doesn't offend anybody, that I'll stay longer until you get your settled minister. Because it would be a great pleasure and privilege getting to know you, growing in faith and serving others in the name of Christ. There might be a couple other things you probably should know so you don't feel like you've been bait and switched. One is that I tend to think outside the box. I'm a little different kind of minister in that respect. I don't usually live out my faith with the party line. I think God has given us good noggins and we all ought to use them. Being raised by my grandmother part of my life, I stood at her elbow at the stove every night. And so I like this little story about this boy who was watching his mother bake this ham and use the family recipe. He watched her put the brown sugar on it, and the cloves and those little pineapple wedges you put on them. And then right before she put it in the oven, she cut off both ends. Then she put it in the oven. And he said to her, "Mama, why do you do it this way?" And she said, "Well, it's the way my mother taught me. It's our old family recipe." Well, he kept it to himself, but when he saw his grandmother the next week, he said, "Grandma, do you make that ham Oh, you mean the old family recipe? Of course I do, honey. And Grandma, do you put the brown sugar and the cloves and the pineapple on them? And do you cut off the ends before you put it in the oven? Oh, yes, honey. I sure do. It's the way my mother taught me. So a little bit later, around Christmas time, they were at the rehab facility, and he saw his great-grandmother, and he said, "Great-grandmother, do you make that ham recipe like we make in the family?" She said, "Well, I use the old family recipe." He said, "Do you use that brown sugar and put that on there, and the cloves and the pineapple?" "Oh, yes, honey, it's the recipe we've always used." And Great-Grandma, do you cut off the ends of the ham before you put it in the oven?" "I sure do." He said, "Why do you do that? Is that to help the juices flow? Does it help cook it through, or does it absorb the brown sugar more?" And she said, "Oh, no, honey. I've just always done it that way because my pan was too small." In the church, we can do things over and over and over again because that's the way we've always done it. I'm here to tell you that I'm going to respect your traditions. I love being an interim minister because I get to see how churches do church differently. But we don't always have to do it the same way. And look, I'm really a nice guy. And as long as I'll be here, I think you'll say, he's okay. But the truth be known, I'll probably do things a little bit different than Mark. Mark was great. There will be other great ministers too, and when they come, if you want to assure that they will be a short-term interim minister instead of a settled minister, just say, "Oh, we always do it this way." Okay? Just saying. Just saying. I'm just trying to tell you. All right, so let me cut to the chase here. One of the other things you might want to know about me is that I'm not much for pretense. The book of Genesis tells us that we were made from mud, and to dust we shall return. This tends to regulate my narcissism and keep me humble. It's not a bad place for religious people to be, especially ministers. I tend not to take myself too seriously, so please don't put me on a pedestal. I'm just Jim. I really am. I'll walk beside you. I'll tell you exactly what I think. I'll give you my opinion, and I'll ask for yours. You don't have to think like I think. You don't have to believe what I believe. You don't have to do it my way. Ultimately, you all will get to decide. But as your interim minister, you've hired me to give you my opinion. And I will try to do that as nicely and as directly as I can. Let me tell you a couple of things about what I believe. I believe that we are here for a purpose, to love God and to walk each other home. And I really do believe that all the rest are just details. So I try to remember what John says, "Let us love one another, for love comes from God." I believe that our lives are better when we are generous. I believe we live best in community, in friendships, in love. I believe that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we ought to take the hint, especially if you're a minister. I believe in forgiveness and grace. And I believe that Frosted Flakes are still the best breakfast cereal ever. So we'll talk more in the coming months, days, about interim ministry and where we're going with all this. But for now, let's just settle in and get to know one another. Stop by, make an appointment. Come by and talk to me. Wear your name tag. Introduce yourself and help me to know who you are. But let me be abundantly clear with you about one thing if I don't say another word. At the end of the day, it's not going to be what we do. We'll do our work. John, we'll get you a new settled minister. What will matter is how we do it. And I hope that at the end of our time together, people won't say, boy, that Jim was a good pastor, wasn't he? He had some good jokes. I hope that you won't say what a great interim consultant he was. I hope that what you'll say at the end of the day is that we're just ordinary people with extraordinary love. Because I think that that's really all that matters. And that's how we will go about our work together. Okay? Come see me. I want to get to know you. I really do. And it's going to be hard in a large group. How much better for you to come in and introduce yourself. Let us love one another, for love comes from God. And since God so loved us, we should also love one another. May God bless you, and may God bless United Church of Marco Island.